Alright, so this will be video number 2, um, and we're going to go on to doing standard error of the mean, and then 95% confidence intervals. So the equation for standard error of the mean is here. So it's this value right here. This is standard deviation divided by the square root of your sample size. So we had said before that the sample size, or this n value, was going to be 50, and we already calculated this value, the standard deviation. So I've got the standard deviation here. I'm going to round this to 1.36, and we also have our n value, or our sample size, of 50. So you can use a scientific calculator if you want, or you can just pull up a scientific calculator on Google. So I'm just going to go ahead and this will work because I've got the square root function right here, and this is a scientific calculator where I should be able to calculate these values correctly. So I'm going to use this equation, standard deviation divided by square root of the sample size. So I'm going to take my standard deviation, I'm going to round this to 1.36. So 1.36. I'm going to divide that by the square root of the sample size, which was 50. And so my standard error of the mean is 0.19. So I'm going to put that value in, 0.19. That's going to be my value for the standard error of the mean. So now I've been able to calculate the average, or the mean, the standard deviation, and now the standard error of the mean. The next thing I want is my 95% confidence intervals. So my 95% CI, this means confidence intervals. And how do we do that? Well, your confidence intervals, 95%, is just plus or minus 2 standard errors of the mean. So what does that mean, basically? All right, so I have an average of 15.71. I have a standard error of the mean of 0.19. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my standard error of the mean, which is 0.19, and I'm just going to multiply that by 2. So 0.19 times 2 equals, that gives me 0.38. So I'm going to put in 2 SE for 2 standard error of the mean, which gives me 0.38. That's what I just calculated here, 0.38. Now I can make my confidence interval, my 95% confidence interval. So what's that going to look like? Well, I'm going to take this average, so 15.71, clear this out, 15.71, and I'm going to add 0.38 and put equals. So it's 16.09. I'll put it down here, 16.09 to, now I'm going to do the same thing except subtract. So this time I'm going to take my average, 15.71, minus 0.38 equals 15.33. Now I would probably turn this around instead. So put the smaller value and then the larger value. And this is my 95% confidence interval. What that means is I can be 95% sure that if I were to do this again, the average of the body mass or weight would fall in between these two values. So I can represent it this way, or I can represent it like this. I can say it is plus or minus 0.38. So I can either put in the actual, what would I call this? The actual range, or I can just say it is the average plus or minus 2 standard errors of the mean, which I got right here. So I calculated this value, that times 2 gives me 0.38. I can say the average 15.71 plus or minus that value of 0.38. So that's how I would do both standard error of the mean and a 95% confidence interval. So if you're looking at your assignment, we've calculated the average, we've calculated the standard deviation, we've calculated the standard error of the mean, and the 95% confidence interval as well. All of those for body mass for the non-survivors. So I hope that these two have been helpful for you. I would go in and polish off this table, and again use the examples from earlier, and then in the next video, and I'll hold off, and I will in the next video I'll go ahead and post tomorrow. They give you another equation that you can use. Feel free to use this as well if you want to. It's an approximation, but this one will give you something that's similar, and they talk about the range of values here. So where this says range of values, this is my, right here, my range of values. So anything from this to this would be my 95% confidence interval. As always, email me if you have questions, and I will upload the next video tomorrow in order to hopefully help you out. And we'll talk a little bit about graphing with that stuff tomorrow.